I'm going to send out some information and some white papers on the event to everyone who attended the event, as well as some indicative pricing. So if you want to look at some budgets down the line, we can help out with that. So Johan, how are you doing?
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Dave. Looking forward to it.
Perfect. We have turned off the mics for this because of the number of people attending, but we have opened a Q&A panel. So if you look on the top, you're able to ask questions there. You're also able to chat, and you're also able to give thumbs up, hearts, or angry faces, whatever you like. So please be interactive via the chat and Q&A, and I'll be monitoring that while Johan's doing the presentation. But thanks everyone for coming.
Cool, thanks, Dave. And yeah, I think just from my side, thanks for everyone who's actually made time to join us today. So, I mean, I think just from introduction perspective, everybody knows Dave, but yeah, I'm Juan Epgen, sales engineer at Mimecast, and yeah, I'm just going to take you through a couple of slides, really focusing, as Dave mentioned, in terms of, what's the threat landscape changed out there from a cyber security perspective, and what has Mimecast, what's the strategy in terms of offering protection to organizations. So when we look at it, I mean, if we look at it now more than ever before, it's really around email and collaboration toolset, right? That's where work happens. So when we look at it, in fact, I think it's the largest digital transformation in history, and can be coming back off the global pandemic and the need to bring people back together virtually. So in many respects, during this global event from a couple of years ago, it really was designed to separate us, right? That was some of the effects. But once again, email and collaboration suites out there really brought businesses and employees, people back together. And this is a key point. I mean, let's look at it. It's which way we use how communications, people, and data are connected. And then lastly, it's just around email and collaboration suites that's found in some of the trusted tools out there, which we use. But email still being one of those number one fundamentally tools that's being used to collaborate in any sense of way. I mean, if we look at it, any workflows that's been automated in platforms, there is still a form of email that actually triggers that workflow. But with this, it's also become what we call the biggest work surface out there. And however, the result is that this primary work surface is also now the greatest concentration of risk, which malicious actors are starting to target, because they know every business with the adoption of these collaboration tool sets are using collaboration tool sets in a combination with email. A couple of years ago, someone told me that just after the pandemic that this is the end of the email era, and I mean, it made me think. And if we look at some of these stats around the state of email security reports out there, it's actually the opposite. Email usage and consumption has actually increased, and 80% of some of the respondents attested to that. So because of all the data that these platforms hold, productivity suites are as compelling to malicious actors as they are to organizations who rely upon using those different tool sets out there. So to me, and from a mind perspective, from a strategy, we really started looking and questioning what the fundamental question for security teams when meeting with organizations globally that security teams need to ask is how this work surface, this new way of work, primary work surface, has now become the primary risk and attack surface. Now, I mean, if we look at it in all sense, you've got the people aspect, which is individuals, their identities, you've got communications and data. And the key thing here is malicious actors uses communication channels really to get to the people, because they know behind an email address, there's some human sitting that's opening up the email, that's got access to email. And secondly, it's around, they've typically got access to data, right? Whether it's sensitive data, but private information within your different businesses and organizations. But there are the three core risk attack vectors that emerge. It's really around, number one, it's around malicious actors. And these are typically those highly determined and well-resourced actors out there. And they bounce between email usage, collaboration toolset platforms out there with more sophisticated attacks. We all, if I speak to just by raise of hands or just the thumbs up, how many of us all use Microsoft? That's a trusted brand. Google. Those are all trusted solutions out there which we use. And that's why they've become the biggest target, as it presents the most people that they're able to fish from a malicious actor perspective. They have more ways to gain access to data, access to different environments. And if we look at it, data has become that new commodity. Secondly, it's around the employer area, and this is the people aspect from a Mimecast perspective. That's our fundamental susceptibility to being fooled and fall victim for these increasingly complex phishing attacks out there. So in our new world, everybody responds faster. We click on links, whether it's on email, it's on instant messaging platforms we use in our personal capacity. Everybody starts to respond quicker to things, and we tend to trust by default, right? So, Dave, I get a mail from you or WhatsApp. Yeah, I know I've been chatting to you, so of course I'm going to respond to it. And that's how these victims, they play on people's emotions and trying to expose those vulnerabilities. And then lastly, it's around technology fallibility. And if we look at it, there's no solution that's 100% resilient, fool safe. If we look at it in on-premise environments where you've got hybrid environments, typically your old type of data centers within your business controls, whether it's cloud, technology does fail. And while technologies can fail without malicious intent, attacks are built actually to target vulnerabilities. Now, if I look at it, I've been involved in quite a few forensic investigations, and typically when a breach has been reported and detected, the first platform that gets taken offline is the platform where the breach was identified, and secondly, email, because email is one of the biggest, how can I say, culprits in terms of how businesses ingest and extract data into your organizations, into your business. Now, this shouldn't be any news to anybody on the call, but I mean, if we look at it, so yes, 91% of breaches still start off by email in some form or shape, and that's really, it's increasing, and the sophistication behind these attacks are actually getting better and better. And the cyber criminals, the malicious actors out there, they're also starting to leverage off artificial intelligence, automation, to actually automate cyber attacks, phishing attacks, etc. And I'm sure we've all seen these type of what the impact these cyber attacks has globally. I mean, if we just look in South Africa, in South African context, we have seen in the last year, there's been a couple in South Africa that's actually been reported as part of some of the regulations out there. But it talks around ransomware attacks, where organizations' data is kept at ransom. How do they recover the data? One of the biggest culprits still is employer error. The human firewall error is people start just browse sites without thinking twice, click on links. And I mean, one of the ones I've seen quite often now is where breaches come into organizations. And if we start investigating it, it's either through when maybe an external device has been connected to a corporate device, and people use, or some organizations allow employees to use WhatsApp web or WhatsApp desktop on the device. So they get links sent in WhatsApp messages, which is malicious, and subsequently bypass certain security controls. And then lastly, it's around, if we look at it from technology fallibility. Now, this one is quite key because it adds additional risk to organizations when there is an outage, whether it's unplanned, a planned outage, or just an outage in general. Because what we see quite often is employees, once again, the human error, the people, they start using their free personal email addresses, mail accounts to share corporate information. Now, once again, that talks to the sensitivity around what type of corporate data is being shared through these unsanctioned applications out there, which generally doesn't have all the security controls to protect the data.
And you had one of the other things we've seen sort of post-COVID is more and more people working from home. For example, I'm physically based in the UK. So, it's not uncommon now for users in companies to let their kids play computer games on the work computers and to not be protected from an internet perspective. You're normally safely behind a firewall, but now using your computer at home and using it for all sorts of things. So I think that's just making the attack surface of email just that a greater problem at the moment.
Absolutely, Dave. And I mean, something that I saw as well, I mean, just adding on to that was when it was when the pandemic started, it was homeschooling. Now, not a lot of people have had access to more than one device. So homeschooling, whether it's you've got a small child, how do you actually protect that device? Because they're using your device for education. So that's definitely why the risk and the attack vector has definitely increased. Now, around complexity, and complexity often challenges security teams. So if we look at it, security teams on average are spending more time managing technology, best of breed solutions out there. You've got so many different areas which you want to protect your organization from cyber attacks, etc. And because of managing the technology and not the risk, as a result, spending less time thinking strategically about how to protect your business, your organization. So for many security leaders out there, this is really one key thing that fundamentally comes up. It's around how do they actually call the board of directors meeting to communicate a risk strategy or justify security budget or define an integrated cyber approach from a cyber architecture perspective, because you've invested into all these different solutions, but security teams are now spending more time trying to manage those solutions out there and not identifying the risk and how you're going to remediate it. So I think just remembering that an organizational goal is to work protected. How do you comprehensively address all these different risks without suffering from complexity? Because that also talks to a second aspect, is getting the right resources, right skills to manage the best of breed solutions to protect your business from a cyber attack. So from a Mimecast perspective, I mean, the strategic question we focus on is how can we as an organization and a service provider work protected and bring down the risk without creating unnecessary complex environments to businesses, to the security teams. And that's where the Mimecast system really comes into play. Our system really starts with the foundation of understanding the communications, the patterns of those communications, the people aspect, who they communicate with, their behaviors as they engage with this data in these different channels, and how we enable organizations to keep your data moving as well as safe and compliant when at rest. If we look at it in terms of having an independent copy when there is an investigation, how do you actually ensure that the data is tamper-proof when these forensic investigations or cases do come forward? So the Mimecast work protected methodology is really designed to ensure trusted communications, right? It's where Mimecast is constantly validating the user identity, the context, in order to ensure efficacy as well as remediating on demand. When we look at it, it's where using those communication channels to be able to remediate threats that have made it through into your organizations. Once again, if we look at the people aspect, protecting people, this is looking at it in a proactive alerting to end users of potential danger and providing really key guidance at the point of infection or point of a possible risk that's been identified. And then lastly, it's around protecting the data, where Mimecast provides rich data analytics for security analysts. How do you ensure that your data is not being tampered with? That's in an independent in a Mimecast archive where certain administrators or functions within your business has got access to that. But the key thing is leveraging the threat intelligence from Mimecast into your security tool sets. As Dave mentioned, as a service MSP, it's really around bringing that additional value in identifying, detecting, and remediating threats when they do make it through. And the benefit really of to security operation teams really becomes clear. It's around providing continuous visibility of risks before they even become an incident of compromise or indicator of compromise. Getting that information out there, that security teams know that who are those risk users, who's being targeted. And then when we look at it a bit further, it's around by providing dynamic policy adjustments to really help harden an environment during a cyber attack. You don't want to spend 10, 15 minutes to try and identify and creating a manual policy when something has been identified. It's really around dynamically updating policies, protecting the business, whether it's on the communication channel, the user identity, because if we look at it, identity compromised, user account credentials that are being compromised is really one of those biggest attack vectors out there, which leads to quite a few additional attack vectors such as business compromise. And as I mentioned, by providing threat sharing and forensic intelligence with actionable key information so that security teams can respond quickly and prepare for future security events in detecting, remediating, and actually identifying, once again, is a specific people that's being targeted within your business, especially when we look at it from a social crafted engineering attack, because these are also on the increase, and it's quite relevant in South Africa. So there are three core concepts around the Mimecast system that's quite essential. The first being the platform. And this really talks to the efficacy, the scalability and telemetry that becomes available from a Mimecast perspective, making sure that we can scale when required. Secondly, it's around our mesh architecture. Now, mesh is not a new term to anyone, but in Mimecast terms, we call it the Mimecast extensible security hooks, and this is really leveraging into your best-of-breed security solutions to integrate all the information out of Mimecast that security teams can actually start with identifying, detecting those threats, and as well enabling that your ecosystem you've invested into endpoint detection platforms out there, whatever the case might be, but leverage the info from Mimecast through the API mesh architecture into those solutions. So when a zero-day threat is detected at the gateway, from a Mimecast perspective at the perimeter, share those that threat intelligence with your endpoint. So once again, when someone, and I think Dave, this really talks to the threat vector which you mentioned. So when people or you work from anywhere in the world and you connect to personal email address from a corporate device, and that threat has been shared in that free commercial platform, that the users and your devices, your business is protected. And then lastly, it's around our integrated suite of products, which organizations really take advantage of, and the benefits of the overall integration between the suite of tools, from protecting the people, the data, as well as that number one factor, the communications, which attackers often use. So as you'll see, today we're just going to focus around the email security aspect, the social engineering defense, as well as security awareness training. So, but in essence, the Mimecast system is really, it's designed to keep the key intersection of communications, people, and data secure. And the Mimecast product suite really means you don't have to compromise between security and simplicity, and also ensuring there's always what we call air gaps in a cybersecurity framework when we meet with customers, or from an architecture perspective, ensuring that those possible risk areas where there's an air gap are actually performs part of your cybersecurity strategy. So thereby enabling your communications to be trusted as an organization, as a business, your people to become more cyber aware, and data to remain safe in a external party, or external in the Mimecast archive, for as long as you're Mimecast customer, depending on different services which organizations subscribe with, really to protect the integrity of the data, should they experience, as an example, ransomware attacks, which is quite relevant. So just in terms of the work surface, if we look at it, the work surface has now become what we call the biggest risk vector, right? And this is where the risk is now being targeted. So when we take a closer look around it, there's no question that we all, I mean, us as Mimecast as well, all of us use Microsoft as our backend platform, collaboration, email, etc. But they have become the top target globally. And attackers are leveraging on that because they know people trust it, organizations trust it, whether it's in a personal, professional, business capacity. And 61% of attacks are being blocked by Mimecast explicitly that targets Microsoft. These attackers clone those websites, the logos of brands we all trust out there. And once again, it's clear, just to reiterate, it's around 91% of cyber attacks that involve email somewhere in the attack chain. And this really talks to whether it's malwareless attacks, impersonation attacks, they're trying to compromise executives, someone who's got authority. But it's key that if we still see the increase in terms of these cyber attacks that starts off through an email. And it's quite interesting. I mean, if I look at after a successful breach, it's still quite long. 306 days is the average number of days in which any adversary that's now sitting and watching your network, which we also call the wailing time, dwelling time in the organization. So accounts being compromised, and they just start gaining access and monitoring until they identify accounts that they can escalate or compromise to start gaining insight to craft the next stage of an attack. So really, if we look at it from these malicious actors, and Dave, I'm sure you've also seen this. I mean, what are the key objectives through different? Then there's a number of different tactics out there which they use, and it's become very complex to defend against them now. Email, like I mentioned, it's still one of the key factors, but the second thing, and I see this quite often, and Dave, I think from your side as well, that human element, the human firewall, where end users and employees are not they're not being educated around being cyber aware, to look out at being able to identify cyber risk out there. Do you see this quite often?
Yeah, and I think it's just the manner of the way things are now. I mean, I'm sure everyone in this room is like me and absolutely loves email and how effective it is to get your job done. And what was quite interesting during COVID as well was everybody gave plaudits to the health departments and how well they were doing for everything. But we know the IT industry really came to the fore during COVID. Suddenly, everyone had to work from home. Suddenly, the pressure was on IT. And I think what we're all seeing is just this email overload at the moment. It's not uncommon to get a few hundred emails in a day. And to be super protective of looking at who those mails are coming from, and is that attachment genuine, and using multiple devices and multitasking, being in a Teams meeting while you're answering emails to try and be hyper productive. I think this is all culminating in people being more lax when it comes to email security.
No, absolutely. And I mean, it's clearly evident, and I think we're all guilty. One key thing is around having multiple devices where people now, you're mobile, you're busy traveling, because since traveling opened up again, and there's a certain level of additional risk that comes with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk you through a few examples of the Mimecast system at work, how we actually protect organizations based on the people, the communications and data. So if we look at it, we've really layered our approach across every aspect of our detection stack from a security perspective to protect organizations against malicious and time-wasting email, those spam emails where typically what they do is they spray and pray approach. They just send out mail hoping that the receiving gateways will accept that mail. And I mean, that's in the early stages, the low sophisticated cyber attacks. But if we look at it, we protect 390 plus 1,000 email domains every day globally. So it's really a lot of threat intel which we have, and puts us in a great position to actually share that threat intel across our grids. Because typically some types of attacks that are targeting Europe might not be targeting South Africa at this stage, or Africa as a continent. But it's a matter of time before those type of attacks start changing direction. And because of the Mimecast platform, the system, threat intelligence is shared within the platform, making the platform smarter as the AI as well identifies all these zero-day attacks. And then it also allows us to immediately, I mean, let's look at flag those emails that's designed to trick or fool end users, to catch end users via what we call spear phishing attacks and domain hijacking, as well as domain or supply chain impersonations. But domain hijacking is one that's coming across. I see that threat increase in South Africa quite often. Now, this is the email inspection funnel, which we call it in Mimecast. But the key thing is just to, as some notes here, it's around impersonation protection. So I mean, I can go do my social research on Dave as if I'm a malicious actor, and I see what his role is in the business. He's got authority to approve payments, as an example, if that's in his function. But if the attackers are starting to impersonate people with these more targeted attacks to people who's got in the business, your C-level executives, who's got access to authorize payments, as an example. But Mimecast really gives the ability to create granular policies because different roles, personas in organizations have a different type of risk, right? So being able to create the granular policies to actually identify impersonation attacks and taking action, right? But at the same time, share that threat intelligence with your security teams through if it's a managed SOC service, whatever the case might be, that they become aware. One that comes up quite often is as well, it's around domains. So Dave, first, Nate, what these attackers are doing is, and I've seen this as well now quite often, they change the domain, they create a domain that looks very similar to FirstNet, but they change one of the characters using Punycode or Cyrillic characters. So to the human eye, it looks like a R, but it isn't an R. So of course, I trust it, man, I'm going to reply to it. And that's typical where these advanced sophisticated attacks, Mimecast now, from our security detection stack, we actually identify those attacks in early stages and prevent them from being delivered, creating multiple different actions. Do you want to deliver it, but inform security teams around that? Now, this is an example of a impersonation attack. So just for purposes of the demo, I might have to remove some sensitive information, but in this case, I'm being targeted. One of the colleagues I work with, his name is Jared, but this email did not come from him. So his name is Jared Beckley, and I've got my role is from an HR perspective where I approve payments to be made to bank account details for salaries, etc. But as you can see, my colleague has now been impersonated, and all of a sudden you start getting these emails. These are typical of some of the impersonation attacks that are happening, and they're also on the increase. But the key thing is, as you'll see, there's the two different banners, right? You've got the amber banner as well as the yellow one, and this informs people that, hey, there's something that's been identified. But once again, as you can see, the name is trusted. Now, the email address is also one of those indicators that constantly changes, because that's what these attackers are doing. And using these banners makes end users, the recipients of those emails, just read it. But that, at the same time, also adds to what we call banner fatigue. And I'll take you through the additional protection as the evolution of email security from Mimecast has now released additional functionality to target and solve the problem around banner fatigue. Secondly, it's around email-borne attacks, attachment inspection, because if we look at it, a lot of these attachments that are being sent do have malicious intent. So once again, it's a layered approach across every aspect of our entire detection stack. And we inspect close to 1.3 billion emails every day globally. So once again, that threat intelligence, identifying the types of threats, is shared within the Mimecast platform through our threat intel intelligence integration to make sure that organizations are protected when these attacks are being targeted specifically. So it allows us to immediately block a vast majority of email threats and continuously optimize our detection engines, as well as the AI and machine learning that forms part of that core detection stack, ensuring the efficacy is at the highest state. Now, this is from a weaponized attachment perspective, where you'll see we've got quite a few different, as I mentioned, it's best of breed multi-layered protection in our stack. We know that what's malicious types of files, executables, or those type of files that's not normally used to send over email, what's got dangerous macros in documents. But this just talks to the multi-layered security approach in our detection stack. And one key thing as well, it's really around the ability to ensure that when emails comes in, that the recipients of those emails, if they add attachments, gain access to the original attachment in a safe format, what we call safe file format, ensuring that there's no impact to business, but at the same time ensuring that if Dave, you actually now want the original attachment, right? You've got the ability to request, let that attachment release against the Mimecast security stack one more time and go through the detection stack. And if it does fail, don't let the original attachment that's now got possible malware or malicious content in it to be delivered, and inform security teams around that. So with full emulation sandboxing, because a lot of these advanced attacks are now targeted and they've got intelligence built in to evade security platforms out there. So once again, just an example of emails where there's a weaponized attachment. So this is an email that contained a malicious email attachment, but for the purpose of this, the attachment was converted to safe file conversion. So Dave, you get that attachment immediately in your mailbox, you know from where it came. But at the same time, you now want that original file to be released to you. You want to look at the content. So that's when it releases and it goes, once again, gets scanned to the Mimecast attachment protection security stack. It's really around to identify, yes, what would happen to that file if we fast forward it a month down the line. As I mentioned, a lot of these cyber attacks have got intelligence to evade security platforms out there. And if it is deemed as unsafe, you actually get a notification, Dave, that's saying that the attachment isn't safe at all. It's been whatever the case might be for the reason, and share that info with security teams that you can actually take actual insight. Go search, do threat hunting, identify, is that similar file anywhere in your organization, within your customer's perimeter network? Did it come in through a different way or means? Then if we look at it from a URL perspective, I think, Dave, you mentioned it. It's on mobile devices. We're traveling. We've got working from anywhere now in the world. How quick are we to click on links, respond to emails? And that's typically where we know how difficult phishing links are for most organizations. And we scan approximately 503 million URLs every month. And we look for these types of different attacks, right? It's phishing attacks. So a key difference in Mimecast in our security stack from a URL perspective, it really focuses on, so every link is rewritten, every URL is rewritten to ensure it can be expected for its reputational checks and brand verification through our AI technology in the backend, as well as what we call deep page scan analysis. Why is that? Because attackers become smarter. They clone websites, create websites, and clone logos of brands we all trust out there. So it's important thing to note is that each of these checks is performed upon every click by the recipients of these emails as they're rewritten and integrated in what we call a browser isolation system, that service that's integrated as well as a service that's available for URLs it's typically URLs that are not known to be suspicious or malicious. It's uncategorized, but the key thing is in the business users are able to actually access the URL, but have controls in place that when, Dave, you get a mail from me and it's not me, it's a malicious URL. Well, it's not malicious, it's uncategorized. One of those new domains has been created. You can control whether you actually enter your credentials, yes or no, because typically that's where these credential harvesting attacks start in the early stages of a cyber attack.
Yeah, and one of the most dangerous ones is probably your Microsoft login page. And if that's a spoofed domain, you've just given away your corporate credentials, your Active Directory credentials.
Absolutely, and I mean that leads to that credential that's been compromised. And crafting impersonation attacks, business email compromise attacks. And it's really evident. I was almost caught a couple of months ago. We did a Mimecast sent a phishing attack, and typically it was one of those logos which we all trust as a business. We use the service, and fortunately, I reported it. I didn't click on it, but it just shows these attackers, because it uses real-world examples where attackers are now working on emotions, etc. But the key thing is really around pre-click, post-click checks every time, because the site that's deemed as safe today might be compromised. And when you click on that link a month later in your mailbox, it gets scanned through the Mimecast security tracking once again. And it leads to what we call user education in line I look at it as a learning moment. So typical example, yeah, it's where a email came in, it's got a malicious URL, and challenge the recipients of those emails when they click on this link. Do they think that link is safe, yes or no? When they select, no, they think it's safe, the Mimecast platform dynamically will start sending out these challenges to end users with a learning moment that, yes, no, the site is harmful. So restricting the end recipient of that email to actually get to the site, but giving some tips or that learning moment, because that adds to from a human firewall perspective, they form part of a cybersecurity strategy, because the more secured end users are, the better for the organization, because that forms part of a security strategy now. And then if we look at these advanced whaling attacks that's out there, it's really frightening to see how sophisticated they are coming. As I mentioned earlier, Dave, it's what we're seeing is there's a lot of malwareless attacks. So these attackers are getting smarter and smarter, because once again, they're using techniques that are not initially known or seen as malicious. There's no malicious intent. But the key thing is that's where Mimecast released what we call Cybergraph, right? And it's really around, and I'm sure everybody on the call, we've all seen those banners when you receive an email. It's a static banner, as an example, on the left-hand side. It could either be in the body of the mail where it says, do not click on links unless you trust the sender. Now, that really adds to what we call banner fatigue, because, you know, every single email that you receive from me, Dave, is going to have that banner added. So if you look at the way the human brain works, we start ignoring that because it's too many banners, banner fatigue. Typically similar to what happened a couple of months, I think just more than a month ago, there was a global cyber breach that was on the news. I'm sure we've all seen that. But once again, the way these malicious actors got in, infiltrated, was through a form of fatigue, two-factor authentication fatigue. So really, fatigue is a key aspect. So on the right-hand side, you'll see how the Mimecast Cybergraph banner now actually applies email banners. And these banners dynamically change based on risk. It could either be red, it could be orange, amber, it could be blue information, and then a deep red, which really talks to the different risk levels. But the key thing here is you start seeing the banner actually gives you real insights into at the point of possible risk. Yes, it's the first email to your organization. Nobody's ever sent that to you. And Dave, it's someone similar that you've contacted before from an email communication perspective. But then looking at it from that awareness, educational perspective, it takes it now to the next stage. As you can see, that real-time learning moment I was speaking about. Yeah, the banner, as an example, is amber, and it really gives that insight to end the recipients of those emails. Domain was created recently. Yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting an email from the sender. It's the first email to organization. So I'm now being educated through awareness training. I've got the ability to protect my organization. I can go and report that message as dangerous, as an example, or I want to report it as spam. Or if I now think, as Johan, I trust the sender, I can remove the banner only for me, that by marking it as safe. But if anyone in the business receives a mail and it's from that same sender, the banner will apply. But Dave, now with the normal static banners, I'm sure you've also seen this, the effectiveness of those banners. Because in essence, it was an audit finding a couple of years ago. So a lot of security professionals started adding those banners. What's your thoughts around?
I think, so many people on this call may already be Mimecast customers to some degree. And Cybergraph was a relatively new acquisition by Mimecast. I think it's about 4 years, 3-4 years old, if I'm correct, Jan. I think that's about the timelines.
100%.
So while a lot of customers may have some of the security platforms, they don't have the Cybergraph element added. And for me, this is quite an exciting addition to the Mimecast stack, because we're using real artificial intelligence here to warn people. And you can remove mails from everyone's mailbox with Cybergraph as well. Yeah. And so, if someone has an issue, they can remove it from all inboxes in the organization. Maybe just elaborate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, where I see, fortunately, I was lucky enough to work with organizations when it was launched in the US and across Europe. It's really around when a email, as you can see here, Dave, you've now marked this message as dangerous. It goes to the Mimecast SOC team, where the Mimecast SOC team will actually investigate that. But the key thing is, you as Dave, your security teams in FirstNet, inform them that, yes, Johan has marked this sender as dangerous. Dynamically, that banner will change, as you can see, to deep red for if it's 60 people in the business that received it, it will change for all the recipients. But your security team receives a copy of the email that's now been reported. Using the Mimecast threat remediation service or internal email protect, or the security teams now don't have to go create complex PowerShell scripts to go search for the message, who received that message, use that service to actually go remediate that message. And as you can see, these banners dynamically update. And I think a key thing to point here is if we look at the acceleration of mobile devices being used, it really talks to how do you control all these multiple devices. I, for one, use five different devices. Now, this is all agentless. There's no requirement to deploy any agent to any device, mobile, corporate device. The Cybergraph protection works regardless of any agent. And then as part of privacy compliance regulations, this is one of the key aspects where emails contain what we call hidden trackers. It's not something new. A couple of years ago, a lot of marketing solutions, sales solutions, CRM platforms in the cloud started sending emails that had embedded hidden trackers in it. And the key thing there was just to level measure levels of engagements. I want to know, Dave, I send this email to you. How often did you open that email? It means that you might be interested in this service. So now I can start sending you more targeted marketing campaigns. A few years down the line, attackers are abusing these hidden trackers with malicious intent, because the key thing is they gain access to sensitive information. Dave, I know that you're based in South Africa, but I'm now you become the target. So when I craft a mail to you, because there was a tracker embedded, I now know that you're in the UK, you've opened the email from the UK, and 2 days later you're in Spain. So when I craft a mail to you, I'm going to try and impersonate someone in your business with who you work through that social engineering crafting techniques. And it adds to a level of trust to make urgent payments, as an example. But a second aspect is, I now, through these trackers, these malicious actors gain access to sensitive information, your IP address, which version of Windows or Apple are you using on your device? Because typically, as we know, software, there's constant vulnerabilities and fixes to close these from a patch management perspective when vulnerabilities are identified. So attackers are abusing that information to expose those using other channels, whether it's through collaboration tool sets or instant messaging, etc. So Cybergraph actually renders those trackers useless. These senders that's got trackers embedded, those hidden trackers, are actually rendered useless. They don't gain any insight into that sensitive information, protecting the business, but you as an organization gain insight to who's actually targeting you. Is it maybe competitors in the market? And that's the key thing. It's the evolution of the email security, as well as focusing on advanced phishing attacks. Then lastly, I'm just going to go through, we're going to touch on that human element. So I'm going to just skip through one slide here. I'm more than happy to share the link with you. I'm just got this enough time. It's a video around awareness training. But just in terms of awareness training, reducing user risk, part of the strategy, and it's a global thing, it's around ensuring that the end user community within organizations form part of a cybersecurity strategy. How do you mitigate 90% of that big risk that talks to what I call a click happy user? I get every email I get, I just click on everything, although it's being blocked, I'll click on the next link. So how do you actually mitigate that 90% of the risk vector? Now, every day, I mean, security and IT teams like yourselves are tasked with mitigating risk out there, security risk. And that's the key thing, is including the awareness training program to ensure that it removes the overwhelming aspect from end user awareness training, where they don't have to spend 20, 30 minutes now reading through documentation, because a lot of times people start fast forwarding or they just want to get completed. Secondly, is around keeping it simple, but at the same time using humor, actionable information around educating from a cyber risk, whether it's compliance, whether it is identity protection, because the platform's got multiple different templates included, which organizations are now leveraging to use to keep end users educated. And I think, Dave, just one key thing, which just to share with you and the audience, it's around, as you'll recall, when I go back to Cybergraph, that learning moment, the URL protection, do you think this URL is safe, yes or no? It just talks to the entire Mimecast strategy, how we're now looking at protecting the communications, the data, and the people, but that number one element, the human firewall, that the end user is now more educated because they're receiving targeted awareness training, giving them the ability to report suspicious messages through Cybergraph when those anomaly communication behaviors are detected from a malwareless attack perspective, and as well as if they click, they're not just going to start clicking on a link, because the key thing, it's really around, we are confident in our approach around our awareness training and the content as well. It just works. So when analyzing the Mimecast grids globally, we continue to see that organizations that are using Mimecast awareness training are significantly less likely to just click on any link or click on malicious links than their peers at organizations or businesses that do not offer any awareness training. Now, at the most important feature from a security perspective and awareness training can offer is user risk reduction, right? It's to measure the consent of end users. The integration to the Mimecast secure gateway, where you now gain insight to who's clicking on links, correlating that from a risk perspective. And if we look at it, ensure that good behaviors are promoted and that bad behaviors are changed, building what we call a resilient user community. Because if a user becomes more cyber aware in the business work life, it becomes a way of life. They become more cyber aware in their personal capacity. And then just in terms of with that all being said, I mean, just to summarize how we effectively manage and provide value to these three different personas, but I mean, it's not the only personas in organizations around executive teams, right? They're interested typically in the strategy and the deliverables of the service, but don't need all the finer technical details. So it's really, again, insights at high level, which proves that the risk has been reduced and they've got actionable intelligence, which end users aren't completing their awareness training, who's failing it constantly, and send those specific individuals that are failing awareness training to a more targeted awareness training session. Administrators, we know it's all tough to determine where to start and how to execute any awareness training program. So that's why when working with a Mimecast managed service, it really aims to relieve that burden of an already fatigued security team out there with effective results. And when we look at it, also seamless experience for both the business and the end users. And then once again, this is the key aspect that's around those end recipients, the end users, the toughest critic of any program, and where we now look at actually increasing the positivity, the engagement levels with award-winning content that really focuses, as I mentioned earlier, around humor. It's got the punchlines, and we give users an experience that doesn't feel like it's not just like your normal training, but like a break from a busy day during your lunchtime, whatever the case might be, and proven to nudge their behavior in the right direction, becoming more cyber aware. And then lastly, it's around what we call safe fish. And once again, this is tightly integrated into the Mimecast platform, and it's really there to protect using real-world examples of cyber attacks that you can now do, which is de-weaponized, to actually test end users, send out those phishing campaigns to end users to see, are they still clicking on links? Would they have fallen prey to these phishing attacks that Mimecast has now actually blocked on the gateway. So really using real world examples. And I think, Dave, just before I hand over to you, it's around one of the more known ones out there is the logos, the brands we all trust, the Googles and the Microsofts out there.
Great, thanks very much, Johan. I know that we've got 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to share a deck on just way forwards. You should see my deck up on the screen now. Can you confirm, Johan?
All good.